Our very special guest today is Elinor Tatum, chief editor of the Amsterdam News. Elinor, welcome back to Reaching Out.
Well, it's great to be back with you. I can't believe it's been 4 years since I first came on the show with you.
I can't believe it either. Time flies. And
you didn't get any older.
I did get older.
No, you didn't.
I did. You didn't either.
Oh, thank you.
You're having your 105th anniversary of the newspaper. Tell us about that before we begin.
Well, yes, we're having our 105th anniversary on December 15th with a gala at the Edison Ballroom. That is just going to be so much fun. It's not your typical sit-down chicken dinner. It's going to be a lot of casino games and a big band and a bunch of surprises and a few little speeches, but not too many, and great food, great people, and great fun. And so we really are having it as a big old party.
December 15th?
December 15th.
Are our listeners invited?
Well, there's going to be information in the newspaper on how to buy tickets, and we're always looking for more sponsors for this event because it is a fundraiser for the Amsterdam News Educational Foundation.
Very good. Please share with us, our audience, the history of your newspaper, because the Amsterdam newspaper is a very famous paper. It's been around, of course, for 105 years because you have your 105th anniversary. Can you give us a little bit of background about the Amsterdam News?
Well, the Amsterdam News was founded in 1909 in what was known as the San Juan Hills section of New York, which is where a lot of the black community lived in at the turn of the century. And that was right where Lincoln Center is now. And it was started by a man named James Anderson. He had $10, a dressmaker's table, and 6 sheets of paper. And that's what started the newspaper. And it sold for 3 cents back then. And it grew to be one of the largest and most respected black newspapers in the country.
Wow. Now, of course, your audience serves more than the black community these days. I mean, because it just wouldn't survive with just one group. Tell us some of the stories that you've focused on in the last, I would say, 3 months.
Last 3 months. Well, I mean, I've been at the newspaper for 20 years now. So 3 months and 20 years, that kind of all fall right into each other at this point. But, lately, a lot of the things that we've been talking about are, of course, the elections, both local and nationally. We've been talking about what has happened in Ferguson and keeping an eye on what's going to be happening with the grand jury there. We've been talking about police brutality a lot and what's been happening in New York City on that front. We've been talking about changes in the guard within the police department, changes in training tactics and things like that. Everything from that to healthcare to education. I mean, we cover the gamut. Whatever affects communities of color, we're going to cover it, whether it's here or abroad.
Now your father is the late, great William Tatum. Can you tell us a little bit about your dad?
Well, my dad grew up in North Carolina, and his father was a sharecropper, but had a newspaper. And his newspaper, he actually had 3 newspapers. They were farm newspapers, and they printed whenever they had enough ads. My father says he was the managing editor at age 9. So newspapers kind of ran in his blood. And one of his father's dreams was always to have a newspaper like the Amsterdam News. And so my father's goal from a very young age was to own a newspaper like the Amsterdam News. But he actually got to own the Amsterdam News.
Wow, and he passed it on to you.
Yes, he did.
That's great.
So it's a wonderful legacy, and it's a real responsibility.
Tell us from your perspective, if your father was here today, what would he had said about the Ferguson case in Missouri?
Well, he used to do a radio show every Thursday morning, and it was called Tatum Thursdays. And at the end of the show, his sign-off was, "I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore." And That's what he would be saying right now. And he would say that we have to continue to organize, that we've got to continue to fight. About almost 20 years ago, when I was covering some of the issues that were going on at the city university system, and I was watching these young people learning how to protest from the beginning because no one had taught them, I said to my dad, "Dad, why didn't you guys teach us how to fight?" And he said, "Because we thought we had done it for you."
Wow.
And a statement like that is saying, okay, we thought we had won that battle. But as he began to see that battle was a continuing struggle and that we need to redouble our efforts and to continue to teach our young people how to continue to protest, how to fight, how to make change. Because if we do not stay diligent, we're going to lose all the strides that we've made.
Now, the protesting you're talking about were the CUNY tuition hikes
Yes.
back in the 80s.
90s.
90s.
90s. I mean, stuff was going on in the 80s,
Yes.
but I got to the paper in 1994.
1994.
And in 1994 is when I really got involved with watching and reporting on the students taking over buildings and protesting the tuition hikes, the end of open admissions, and things like that.
Yeah, they had everything but the afros then.
Yes, exactly. And it's really interesting to see some of those young people now are in the city council. I remember reporting on Adonis Rodriguez when he was a student leader at City College. And now to see him as a city council person was just fantastic.
And I mentioned afros. Speaking of afros, Dante de Blasio, the afro, is credited for Bill de Blasio's success becoming the mayor. It's been just about a year since Mayor de Blasio's taken office. How do you assess his first year so far?
Well, Bill de Blasio is an interesting mayor. He's made some very interesting decisions. He's taken on some interesting fights. I think he's really got a lot of issues in front of him that he's going to have to deal with. I think he's got some real problems with the police department. And I believe that he's got some problems within his inner circle as well. And I don't know how smooth the next 3 years is going to be.
Right. When you talk about the real problems with the police department, I know they're without a contract. That's one. Two, I know that the top African-American officer, chief executive officer, just quit.
Yeah, I mean, the loss of Chief Banks is huge.
Yeah.
Chief Banks was a great champion for the community. And when he was promoted, that promotion was to almost a ceremonial position rather than one that actually had any teeth. And if you're going to have someone like Chief Banks in a position, it's got to be a position that actually has some power with it. And it basically took away most of the power that he had as chief of the department. And so, in my opinion, I don't think he wanted to be somewhere where he was just kind of there in name only and didn't have the power to make change.
Yeah, he has a rich family history. His brother is the executive person over at the Eagle Academy.
Yes, he's
brother
over
David.
all the Eagle
Yes.
Academies and has just written a book and has done some amazing things and is really at the forefront of educating black boys in this country. I mean, what they've done with the Eagle Academy system is just incredible.
And his father, Philip Banks Jr., is I don't know if he still is, but he was the head of the New York chapter of the 100 Black Men.
Yes, I mean, yeah, Philip Banks II is also a junior. Yes, is also an incredible man and has done a lot of great work and has raised a bunch of really wonderful sons that have really made a great impact in this community.
So one wouldn't be surprised that he would not want to take a ceremonial position and be delegated to no authority in the police department.
Absolutely.
When he rose to the rank of chief of department.
Right. I mean, he was the highest ranking uniformed police officer. And to go from that to a deputy commissioner that doesn't have any real power, I mean, that doesn't even make any sense.
No, and that's a problem. He could have helped a great deal with the relationship with the police department and the mayor. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays over the next 3 years. So
yes, it absolutely will be, and we'll see what happens. I mean, they've just installed a new chief out in Staten Island who happens to be African American, we'll see what happens with the rest of these appointments. But I don't know how long Bratton is going to stay in this position. I don't know if he'll make it the 4 years, but we'll see.
No, it's interesting. William Bratton has seemed to run every police department, every major police department in the country, including a stint here at New York City and including a stint with the transit police. So he's been around for a long time.
He has absolutely been around a long time, and he's had a lot of experience, but he's also had a lot of issues. And people were leery of seeing him come back to New York. But, what we've seen so far doesn't make us any more hopeful than when we were before he actually took the position. This police department still has a lot of issues. Our young people are still being targeted, and our communities don't necessarily feel any safer.
There's been a great deal of talk about the end of the Great Depression, but it seems like we have a recession, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better. Economic times, I think we're in for the next 3 years. It's going to be rough going in the country with the change of leadership in the Senate. Now that's Republican, and the Republicans control Congress, and then you have President Obama only having 2 more years left. How do you see the next few years?
I think they're going to be very difficult, and I think we're going to see a lot of things turned around that we really don't want to see turned around. And I believe that we're going to find ourselves in a position of really having to fight for everything that we have, and fight even harder to get anything new or to even keep what we have. It's going to be a real struggle over the next 2 years, and in starting now, we're going to have to work on the elections for 2016, because if we don't start working now, who knows what will happen then. If we look at voting rights issues and we look at the health care, if these things continue to go the way that the Republicans would like them to, our communities are going to be out in the cold, and we're not going to have the voices that we have. And there are people at every turn trying to take more and more of our rights away. And so with this economy being what it is, actually under the president, we are doing better than we had been. That's not to say anything great, because
Right.
it's still horrible. Sure. And our communities seem to still be struggling even more than others. They always say that when America gets a cold, the Black community gets pneumonia.
I'm Gregory Floyd, President Local 237 Teamsters. Our very special guest was Elinor Tatum, publisher, editor-in-chief of the Amsterdam News. Thank you once again for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.